Salam, peace be upon you. My name is Muhammad Laik Siddiqui, the father of Holophase. Part 4.5, the anti-smuggling principle. Before we continue, let us remember where we are. In part 1, we discovered that pattern is not decoration on top of reality. Pattern is the condition through which anything becomes publicly identifiable at all. In part 2, we went one step deeper and named the primitive root of all pattern, phi, the permission for distinction itself. Not a thing, not a force, not a substance, just the possibility that this can differ from that. In part 3, we gave phi its first structure. We saw that primitive comparability must be circular, not linear. It must live on a circle because a circle has no privileged absolute zero. It allows relation without hidden origin. In part 4, we drew the unavoidable consequence. If phi is circular, then absolute phi values are not public. What is public is not where you are on the circle in some private coordinate system. What is public is what survives relabeling, differences, relations, invariants. That was a beautiful discovery, but now it creates a danger. If public pattern knowledge lives in invariants, then someone can fake invariants. They can create the appearance of pattern where none exists. They can erase a real pattern. They can increase confidence where uncertainty should remain. They can quietly slip their own preferences into the result and then present those preferences as discovered structure. That danger has a name, smuggling, and part 4.5 exists to stop it. The first shock, we can fool ourselves. Imagine two photographers standing in the same valley at sunset. They point their cameras at the same mountain. The first photographer shows the image and says, "Look how golden the light is. Look how warm the valley feels." The second photographer says, "That is strange. My image looks much cooler, more blue, less golden." They compare cameras, same lens, same weather, same time. Then they discover the first camera had a hidden filter switch on. It automatically warmed the colors. The photographer had forgotten it was there. Now ask, was the first photographer lying? Not necessarily. Was the image fake? Not exactly. But was the claim, "This is how the valley looked," publicly trustworthy? No, because a hidden transformation changed the outcome. This is smuggling in its simplest form, a material choice that shaped the visible pattern but was not declared. The danger becomes even greater in science because many scientific transformations are much less obvious than a warm color filter. They can hide inside software, methods, defaults, assumptions, sampling rules, thresholds, smoothing routines, interpretations, and even ordinary language. This is why part 4.5 is one of the most important parts of the entire foundation. It teaches us that reality can be corrupted not only by falsehood, but by undeclared shaping. What smuggling means. Let us define the term with care. Smuggling is the insertion of undeclared assumptions, primitives, transformations, or interpretations that materially change the claimed phi pattern outcome. That sentence is dense, so let us open it slowly. Undeclared. Something is undeclared when it is hidden, unstated, left implicit, or treated as too obvious to mention. Assumptions. These are choices about how the world is being read, where you draw the boundary, what you count as noise, what baseline you use, what scale you look at, what counts as the same. Primitives. These are deeper assumptions about what kind of reality you are even allowed to talk about. For example, treating time or space as primitive in a place where the framework has not yet allowed that move. Transformations. These are the things you do to raw material before you make a claim: filtering, smoothing, normalizing, aligning, coarse graining, canonically reforming, averaging, cleaning. Interpretations. These are claims about meaning, what the pattern represents, what it tells us, what it means. Materially change. This is the most important phrase. A hidden choice only counts as smuggling in the serious sense if it can change the outcome in a meaningful way. So now we must ask, what counts as material? The materiality test. Not every hidden choice matters. Some details are harmless. Some are cosmetic. Some change nothing important. Part 4.5, therefore, introduces a hard test. A choice is material if changing it can change any of the following: the pattern verdict, the identity class, the strength of the claim, the scope where it holds, the reproducibility of the result, the uncertainty bounds. Let us make each one simple. 1. The pattern verdict. Does the result go from pattern exists to no pattern here, depending on the hidden choice? If yes, that choice is material. 2. The identity class. Does the result change what pattern we think we are looking at? Do two descriptions count as the same pattern under one hidden assumption but not under another? If yes, that choice is material. 3. Claim strength. Does the hidden choice make the claim look stronger, cleaner, more certain, or more predictive than it really is? If yes, that choice is material. Scope of validity. Does the hidden choice quietly expand or shrink where the claim holds? If yes, that choice is material. Reproducibility. Can another person repeat the work and get the same result without being told the hidden step? If not, that hidden step is material. Uncertainty bounds. Does the hidden choice change how confident we should be? If yes, that choice is material. This gives us the rule. If a choice could change the outcome in any of those ways, it must be declared. This is the materiality criterion. It is one of the most practical and powerful tools in the entire framework. Why smuggling is the central threat? Smuggling is not a side issue. It is not a technical problem that can be fixed later by a footnote. It is the central corruption mechanism of pattern science. Why? Because public pattern knowledge is built on invariants, on what survives transformation. But the moment invariants become the heart of public science, hidden choices become the easiest way to fake invariants. A hidden filter can make noise look orderly. A hidden boundary can make a messy system look stable. A hidden normalization can make two things look equivalent. A hidden scale choice can make a rough landscape look smooth. A hidden baseline can make an ordinary event look rare. A hidden equivalence rule can decide sameness before the evidence does. A hidden interpretation can make a pattern sound meaningful before that meaning has been lawfully earned. So the real danger is not only false statements, it is observer preference masquerading as discovered structure. That is why anti-smuggling is not just good practice. It is the firewall that protects the whole science from collapse. Smuggling is often honest. This is one of the deepest and hardest truths in this chapter. Smuggling does not require bad intention. A person can be sincere and still smuggle. A scientist can be honest and still smuggle. A thinker can be brilliant and still smuggle. Why? Because many of our assumptions feel invisible from the inside. They feel natural, obvious, normal, or too small to mention. We inherit defaults from teachers, software, institutions, conventions, and habits of thought. We absorb ways of seeing the world and forget that they were choices at all. That is why anti-smuggling cannot rely on moral character alone. Good intentions do not remove hidden assumptions. Discipline does. The framework is not saying everyone is a liar. It is saying everyone is vulnerable to invisible shaping. And therefore, pattern science must protect itself from honest but undisclosed choices just as much as from deliberate manipulation. That is intellectual humility at a very deep level. The many faces of smuggling. To make this principle practical, we must name the main forms smuggling takes. Once named, they become easier to detect. 1. Boundary smuggling. A boundary is where you say, this is inside the claim, that is outside. Where you cut matters. Imagine studying a forest but counting only the trees inside a neat square plot. The plot boundary changes what species you count, what density you measure, what relationships you observe. Or imagine studying a coastline from far above. At low resolution, it looks smooth. At finer resolution, it becomes jagged. The boundary is not innocent. Boundary smuggling happens when those edges are hidden. Undeclared boundaries can fabricate apparent stability, erase important interactions, create false symmetry, create false persistence. So boundaries must be declared. 2. Transformation smuggling. This is the hidden filter problem. You smooth, denoise, normalize, register, interpolate, align, or convert data into a cleaner form, but do not state how. Transformation smuggling is especially common in modern computational science because software can perform dozens of operations invisibly. A graph can look beautiful because it was smoothed. A signal can look periodic because it was filtered. A pattern can seem clear because inconvenient outliers were removed. Again, transformations are not forbidden. Hidden transformations are. 3. Scale smuggling. Scale determines what becomes visible. At one scale, a cloud looks smooth. At another, it is turbulent. At one scale, a tissue looks uniform. At another, it is made of cells. At one scale, a society looks orderly. At another, it is full of local conflict. If you quietly change the scale and then present the result as if it were the pattern, you have smuggled scale. This includes resolution, sampling density, coarse graining, averaging, temporal windows, spatial windows. Scale must always be declared when it matters. 4. Interpretation smuggling. This happens when meaning is inserted too early. A shape is seen and immediately treated as a symbol. A regularity is seen and immediately treated as a message. A correlation is seen and immediately treated as a cause. A signal is seen and immediately treated as purpose. But interpretation is not pure pattern structure. It is a mapping from pattern into meaning. That mapping may be useful, but it must be declared as such. Pattern first, meaning later. That is the discipline. 5. Randomness smuggling. Modern science often uses randomness, random seeds, random sampling, random initialization, random train test splits, random search procedures. If the random source is hidden, then the result may look reproducible when it is not. A lucky run can be mistaken for a stable pattern. So anti-smuggling requires that stochastic elements be declared too. 6. Equivalence smuggling. This is when someone silently decides what counts as the same pattern. Are mirror forms the same? Are shifted versions the same? Are noisy versions the same? Are coarse-grained versions the same? Different answers produce different sciences, so the equivalence rule itself must be declared. Otherwise, sameness becomes a hidden preference. 7. Primitive smuggling. This is the deepest and most dangerous kind. Primitive smuggling happens when higher layer concepts are treated as foundational. Examples: importing time as primitive where only pattern cadence has been licensed. Importing space as primitive where only relational structure has been licensed. Importing meaning into pure pattern structure. Importing observer privilege into pre-observer layers. Primitive smuggling corrupts the foundation itself. It is the hardest to detect and the most important to block. A story of a chef. Let us use a simple analogy. Two chefs are given the same ingredients and told to cook the same dish. One chef toasts the spices first. One chef adds them raw. One chef simmers slowly. One chef boils fast. One chef blends the final sauce. One chef leaves it textured. When the dishes taste different, it would be absurd for one chef to say, "But we started with the same ingredients, so the result must be the same." The cooking steps matter. Science is often like this. Raw data are ingredients. Transformations are the cooking. If the transformations matter, then claiming that the final result is just what was there without declaring the process is smuggling. Anti-smuggling does not ask us to stop cooking. It asks us to show the recipe. Now imagine a judge. A witness gives testimony. But the testimony only becomes useful if the court knows who asked the question, how it was phrased, what was excluded, what standard of proof is being used, what counts as relevance. If all of that stays hidden, the verdict is unstable. Anti-smuggling makes science more like a just court. Evidence is not merely presented. It is presented together with the conditions under which it acquired its form. That is why anti-smuggling is not a burden. It is fairness. A story of a telescope. Imagine astronomers searching the sky for a rare kind of galaxy. They choose a brightness cutoff. They choose a color threshold. They choose which images count as too noisy. They remove data from parts of the sky contaminated by Earth light. They fill in missing measurements with estimates. Then they report. A new cosmic pattern has been discovered. Maybe it has, but maybe the pattern is partly created by the hidden selection rules. This does not mean astronomy is fake. It means if the rules that shape what was included or excluded are hidden, the claim is not fully public yet. This is why anti-smuggling matters at the cosmic scale just as much as in a kitchen or a courtroom. No hidden defaults. One of the most dangerous phrases in all technical work is, "We used the default settings." Defaults are not neutral. Defaults are decisions made by someone else in some context for some purpose. A default threshold can erase outliers. A default normalization can impose symmetry. A default interpolation can invent smoothness. A default plotting scale can hide variability. A default model can prefer one kind of pattern over another. So part 4.5 insists, there are no obvious defaults if they materially affect the outcome. If it matters, it must be declared. The foundational discipline. Now we can state the chapter's main discipline in full. Certify pattern structure first. Interpret later through lawful handoffs. This sentence protects the purity of the pattern layer. It means first determine what relational structure is actually there. First determine what survives lawful relabeling. First determine what is invariant. Then and only then move to meaning, cause, story, value, or application. If we interpret too early, our desires can shape what counts as structure. If we certify first, interpretation must follow the evidence rather than rewrite it. This is one of the deepest achievements of anti-smuggling. It creates an order of operations that keeps the science honest. The smuggle gate. Because anti-smuggling is so central, it becomes a gate, a formal check that all claims must eventually pass. Call it the smuggle gate. Its question is simple. Are there any material undeclared choices that could change the result? If yes, certification is refused. Not because the claim is false, but because the claim is not yet public. This gate applies across the whole framework. It is not tied to one claim type or one scientific field. It is a cross-cutting guardian. To support this gate, the framework previews several future artifacts: an assumption ledger, a transformation ledger, a boundary declaration, a scale declaration, an equivalence declaration, a randomness declaration. These are not bureaucratic decorations. They are the visible memory of what shaped the claim. What anti-smuggling gives us. By the end of part 4.5, several foundational outputs have been installed. 1. The doctrine. All materially outcome-affecting assumptions must be declared. 2. The materiality test. We now know how to tell what counts as important enough to disclose. 3. The taxonomy. We can recognize the main forms of smuggling: boundary, transformation, scale, interpretation, randomness, equivalence, primitive. 4. The future gate architecture. We now understand why gate-based certification is necessary at all. 5. A new scientific ethic. Science is not only about discovery, it is about visible pathways from evidence to claim. These are major gains. Without them, public science remains permanently vulnerable to self-deception. Refusal is not failure. This is important enough to say clearly. A refusal under anti-smuggling discipline is not failure. If a claim is blocked because material assumptions were hidden, the framework is doing its job. Refusal means the hidden shaping was detected. The public boundary was protected. The claim can now be repaired, downgraded, clarified, or honestly left open. A science that cannot refuse is not a rigorous science. It is a pattern projection machine. Part 4.5, therefore, turns refusal into a virtue. The virtue of not pretending to know publicly what has only been privately shaped. Beyond science. This principle reaches far beyond laboratories. In ordinary conversation, people smuggle assumptions all the time. I know what you meant. Everyone knows this. It's obvious. That's just common sense. This is normal. These are often undeclared baselines, hidden interpretations, or silent equivalence rules. A person trained in anti-smuggling asks, obvious to whom? Normal relative to what? By what standard? What counts as the same here? What hidden background are we using? That kind of questioning is not pedantry. It is a form of respect. It is the attempt to make what was private enough to become discussable. So anti-smuggling is not only a scientific tool, it is a civilizational discipline. Why this part is so deep? Part 4.5 may seem like a technical caution, but it is deeper than that. It teaches that truth is not only threatened by lies, truth is threatened by hidden shaping. A person can sincerely speak false public knowledge because they hid the steps that formed it. A civilization can build whole institutions on smuggled assumptions and never notice. A science can become brilliant in method and still unstable in foundation if it leaves its material choices invisible. Anti-smuggling is therefore not a side rule, it is a philosophy of honesty made operational. It says, do not only ask, is this claim true? Also ask, what shaped this claim before it reached me? That is a profound shift. The handoff to part 4.6. Once smuggling is recognized, another source of confusion becomes visible. Even if all assumptions are declared, different kinds of claims still require different kinds of tests. An existence claim is not tested the same way as an identity claim. An identity claim is not tested the same way as a predictive claim. A predictive claim is not tested the same way as an interpretive claim. If we fail to distinguish claim kinds, we create another kind of confusion, category mistakes. So the next step becomes necessary. Part 4.6, Type Discipline. Because once hidden assumptions are exposed, we must also declare what kind of claim we are actually making. That is where the journey goes next. Final compression of part 4.5. Here is the chapter in its clearest compressed form. Public pattern science is built on invariants, but invariants can be faked if hidden choices shape the result. Smuggling is any undeclared assumption, transformation, primitive, or interpretation that materially changes the outcome. A choice is material if change in it can affect the verdict, identity class, claim strength, scope, reproducibility, or uncertainty. Smuggling can happen through hidden boundaries, hidden transformations, hidden scale choices, hidden interpretations, hidden random seeds, hidden equivalence rules, or hidden primitives. It does not require fraud. Honest but undisclosed assumptions still corrupt public science. Therefore, the anti-smuggling principle is all materially outcome-affecting assumptions must be declared. This is enforced through the smuggle gate and future ledgers that record what shaped the claim. The science must certify structure first and interpret later. If material hidden assumptions exist, certification is refused. That is the central protection mechanism of five-pattern science. The anti-smuggling principle. Always, peace be upon you.